Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 27th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Georgia, a state that is going to be hotly contested in the 2022 midterm elections and was extremely close in the past presidential election in which Joe Biden won the state of Georgia by a very narrow margin. Now, I'm trying to get it up on the screen here, which is why you're looking at a white screen, but what we're going to be looking at today is specifically a Quinnipiac University poll, where they have gone into the state of Georgia and they've asked voters, how do you expect to vote on the governor level, the Senate level, and in terms of Joe Biden's approval rating and disapproval. Now, what you will find here is that Joe Biden, despite being severely, in the negatives in the state of Georgia, doesn't actually impact Democrats as much as you might think. And this actually came across my screen when I was looking at Real Clear Politics, taking a look at two new pollsters from the state of Georgia. One, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is a B/C rated pollster, and Quinnipiac University, which is an A- rated pollster. I'm going to be talking primarily about the Quinnipiac University poll, just because it provides a little bit more context when it comes down to voter sentiment on Joe Biden, when it comes down to voter sentiment across all of these candidates and many of these races. But what you will find is that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, though less reliable by FiveThirtyEight rating, does show the Republicans ahead by a bit of a larger margin, but again, more to discuss at that point. And, looking at this new poll, the headline here actually deals with voting confidence. They find that only 25% of voters in Georgia are very confident in an accurate 2022 election count, and that's where it gets a bit tricky. Though this is a high number, at least when it comes to, or it seems to be a high number of those who aren't necessarily very confident about the accuracy of the 2022 election, I say that this is probably one of the last things that I would talk about when we discuss the results from this poll, because there is a lot more to dissect, and when you take a look at this question in specific, the majority of the state isn't exactly opposed to the legitimacy of the elections, just what seems to be a minority, which is definitely a resemblance of what we see on the national level. But in the Republican primaries, this is where they first start their poll. They ask voters about whether or not they are going to back Brian Kemp, David Perdue, or another candidate in the governor's race. The Senate election we really don't need to talk about. The only takeaway I would say from the Senate election is that Herschel Walker receiving 81% support as the Trump-endorsed candidate is a testament to the impact of that endorsement to an extent, because that is caveated by what is asked later on in the Republican primary question. But with Herschel Walker at 81%, I mean, he is running against a statewide official, Gary Black, yet who only receives single digits. So Herschel Walker 100% has the Senate election in the bag, and there really isn't going to be any type of competitive nature about the Senate primary unless some type of notable Republican decides to enter in, and as of right now, it seems Herschel Walker is the very clear frontrunner. Now, looking at the Republican primary for governor, you will find that Brian Kemp and David Perdue are in a very close race. Only 7% differentiates the two, and Vernon Jones receives 10% of the support. Now, Vernon Jones has been endorsed by many people who are in the Trump wing of this country, Rudy Giuliani, and other members of the former Trump administration. But, 10% is something that isn't enough to win by. So if he decides to drop out, a lot of that Trump support that is going to Vernon Jones will likely go to David Perdue, which could very well push him up to a good position. Now, seeing the question here that was posed right after the Senate and governor election question in the Republican primaries, they ask that former President Donald Trump has endorsed both Herschel Walker and David Perdue in the Republican primary races. Just 50% of likely Republican voters say if Trump endorses a candidate, it doesn't even make a difference to them about who they are going to vote for. But 44% say they are more likely to vote for that candidate, and 5% say they are less likely to vote for that candidate. So if 44% say they are more likely to vote for that candidate, as Perdue and Walker sort of push out the fact that they were endorsed by President Trump, I don't see this as something that would hinder them in any way besides that 5%. And if 50% are saying that it doesn't really make an impact, that means that those who are already supporting Walker and already supporting Perdue aren't going to be swayed negatively by that Trump endorsement, but we're already backing them in the first place. With that 44%, I can imagine that as the endorsement for David Perdue gets publicized a bit more, because it isn't as well known as the Herschel Walker endorsement is, that his ability to win does increase. Now, the general election wasn't what we really focus on. I mean, the primaries are just a step in the process, right? And in the general election, what they find is that Brian Kemp receives 49% of the vote to Stacey Abrams at 47% in the governor's race. In the matchup against David Perdue, it's a tie. 48% to 48%. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the leads here are not significant by any metric. Looking at the previous governor race in the state of Georgia, Republicans have no reason to be confident about their ability to win this state. I think that it is certainly one that could be exceptionally close, just as it was in 2018. Even in 2014, when you take a look at the Georgia race, it wasn't even safe. Georgia was decided by 7.9%. And arguably, yes, he was running against a Carter, but he is someone who had some type of elected experience. Taking a look at 2010, however, that's when the state of Georgia, wasn't even that solid, but still more solid than it was. In 2012, I believe that Mitt Romney won it by around 9.6%, somewhere around in the nines. Ended up going to Trump by 3.5 in the state, by 5.1 in 2016, then went to Biden in 2020. But looking at 2010, Republicans didn't exactly have a super significant margin in the state of Georgia. 10% is not overly impressive. And seeing how it has narrowed up in every election since then, including, different types of election, Senate elections, presidential elections, all of them, the fact that Georgia was so close in 2018 should be a warning sign to the GOP. And, one thing that I do want to say is that, and this is super important when you take the context in for the remainder of this poll that we're looking at from Quinnipiac, one thing you do have to understand is that Joe Biden is unpopular. You see this as an A-minus rated pollster. You see this as a pollster that you can trust that is 82% accurate when it comes down to calling races correctly. And they actually sort of gauge the approval of Joe Biden in the state of Georgia, and it's much worse than it is on the national level. But one thing to keep in mind always is that Joe Biden is in the negative. In fact, he's disapproved of by about 12% more people than he is approved of on the nationwide level. And considering the fact that Georgia was more Republican than the rest of the nation in the last election, means that this approval rating should be worse for Joe Biden. And it is. Yet despite that, Brian Kemp only maintains a 49% amount of support, and David Perdue just 48%. Definitely a telling sign about the inability for the GOP to win over those voters that are clearly upset, discontent with Joe Biden, and move them over into their column. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Taking a look at the approval rating, you have numbers for Perdue, you have numbers for Kemp, you have numbers for Abrams. Not really super important, but they're there if you want to take a look at them. The Senate election, what you will find here is that Herschel Walker, again, with Joe Biden being disapproved of by such a heavy amount, only defeats Raphael Warnock by 1 percentage point. This is a race that is expected to be super, super close, and what we are finding is that the impact of President Biden's approval rating really isn't hitting hard like it did in New Jersey and Virginia for the Democratic Party. Seeing a 1-point difference is a telling sign about what the eventual outcome will be. That yes, it is entirely possible that Brian Kemp or David Perdue could win the governorship. It is entirely possible that Herschel Walker could win the Senate election here against Raphael Warnock, but this doesn't tell us, that there is going to be some type of landslide despite Biden being disapproved of by such a heavy amount. And I continue to pressure in that point just to point out the fact that it is not a testament to necessarily, maybe the Democratic Party, maybe it is to the Democratic Party's resiliency, but the GOP does not have anything in polling numbers or any type of metric in the state of Georgia that shows a substantial swing from where we were just a year ago, just 10 months ago, just 8 months ago, when Joe Biden was soaring high and in his honeymoon period, and now he's in the negative. But despite that, again, the Republican Party is not seeing the level of victories and level of advantages that they enjoyed in 2010 and 2014. And taking a look at the favorability rating, you can take a look at that as well. The job approval rating is where you start to see why it might be high for Raphael Warnock. He's at a 47% approval rating and 40% disapprove, with 13% not offering an opinion, which means he's not doing too bad. Brian Kemp has a 49% disapproval rating, a 42% approval rating, so actually -7 there, with 9% not offering an opinion. So a bit of a flip there between Republicans and Democrats in terms of the statewide elected office. John Ossoff, who's up in 2026, 42% approve, 41% disapprove. Brad Raffensperger, who's up in 2022, 36% approve, 38% disapprove, and 26% do not offer an opinion. But the big thing here, and I highlighted it for a reason, is the fact that Joe Biden has a -36 to 59% job approval rating with 5% not offering an opinion, which means that in the state of Georgia, 24% more of voters disapprove of Joe Biden's job than they do approve. 24%. I mean, in comparing that to the national average, it's substantially different. Considering that Georgia was about 4 points to the right of the national average in 2020, what you will find is that maybe it's acceptable to see -17, -18. But to see -24% means that Joe Biden is doing exceptionally worse in the state of Georgia than he is in practically any other swing state, number one, and exceptionally worse than on the national average. But again, Joe Biden's negative approval rating is not negatively impacting Raphael Warnock to the same extent it did for Terry McAuliffe in the state of Virginia, the same extent that it did for Phil Murphy in the state of New Jersey, and that's where the GOP should really worry. Because despite Joe Biden being down 24%, I mean, I just want you to comprehend that. They're down 24% with their incumbent president. Yet the Democrats are neck and neck with the GOP. Even in these polls from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, polling data here, first of all, I would trust this less than Quinnipiac University, but even if we were to say, these are the only polls that we are provided with, what you find is that David Perdue only defeats Stacey Abrams by 4. -24 versus 4. Brian Kemp by 7. Impressive, but -24 versus 7 shows that there's a significant amount of voters that disapprove of the job that Joe Biden is doing that are fine electing Stacey Abrams, that are fine electing a Democrat to the United States Senate, with Herschel Walker only maintaining, get this, a 3-point lead over Raphael Warnock. These are leads that are not impressive in the least bit. The GOP is unable to turn a positive amount of support for, not necessarily a negative amount of pushback on Joe Biden, and that isn't able to translate into victories. I mean, at this point in time, what I would say is that the GOP just simply needs to convert that anti-Biden energy into pro-Republican energy. And they've done it before with Obama. They've done it before with every Democratic president in modern history, and that's why they've been able to win handedly in midterm elections. Taking a look at the previous Senate elections, they weren't as close. When there was an incumbent Democratic president, Democrats were obliterated in the Senate elections. In 2010, the Democratic Party lost a number of races. They even lost in the state of Illinois. They lost in Wisconsin. They lost in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Iowa. I mean, we're at 6 already. North Carolina, Florida. These are 8 races in which you saw Barack Obama win in those states in 2008. Yet in 8 of those races, the GOP won by significant amounts and flipped a number of them. In 2014, the Democrats didn't exactly do as well. Looking at 2014, what the Republican Party was able to do was win in the state of Colorado. They won in the state of Iowa. Those are 2 states that went to the Democratic Party just 2 years prior in the presidential election. They won in the state of Maine, another race. What they did was flip the state of North Carolina. What they did was flip the state of Louisiana. What they did was flip the state of Alaska. They took the Democratic Party and their victories in many of these states and turned them into Republican victories in the United States Senate, all because Barack Obama was unpopular. But looking at the 2022 races, while there is an expectation for the GOP to pick up a number of these Senate seats, it's not a done deal. These are not solidified, drastically swinging races like what we saw in 2014, like what we saw in 2010. Those were substantial because Barack Obama was so unpopular, like Joe Biden is today, and yet that translated directly to pro-Republican votes. All of that anti-Obama sentiment, you voted for a Tea Party candidate in 2010. That's why Republicans had the biggest victory and pickup for a political party in decades. If you were voting against Obama, you were voting for the Republican. In 2018, Democrats did it well. If you were voting against Trump, you were voting for a Democrat. Yet Republicans here are very clearly struggling, taking Joe Biden, who is nearing Trump in terms of approval. I mean, I kid you not, they are about to converge. As of today, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are just a few percentage points apart. And if we are to move a little bit further down the line, nearly 5 years ago, Donald Trump was at a 41.4% approval. Today, Joe Biden stands at 41.7%. So just after a few more days pass by, it is entirely possible that Joe Biden dips further below the approval than Donald Trump did. And one thing that I also want to point out is that Donald Trump's favorability rating is now higher than Joe Biden's on the national average, according to Real Clear Politics. Another thing that should be discussed, I guess, as a typical type of food for thought type of discussion. But that's not the topic of this video, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about it. But I do want to say that with all of that against the Democratic Party, with them down in the national average, what you are finding is that the Democrats are doing well. While they aren't exactly winning in these governor races, they aren't winning in the Senate elections, they are holding strong. As long as Joe Biden mildly rebounds from where he is right now, it is entirely possible for Democrats to win. At one point in time, people had estimated and, sort of concluded that as soon as Joe Biden dips into the negative, Democrats were done for. There was no possibility of them winning because Joe Biden was up 7 to 8% nationwide in the 2020 election, yet that couldn't translate to a substantial victory. It was a very narrow victory, especially in those Senate and governor elections that were extremely close. 2018, Democrats were up 8 points, and many of those races were still extremely competitive, and in many of them, Democrats still lost, like in the state of Georgia. But in a national environment where Joe Biden is down 12 points, where Democrats are down 4 points in the generic congressional vote, the Republicans still don't hold out strong. All of that expectation that the Democrats were going to be done for and have no real chance at a competitive nature or competitive victory in 2022 are no longer true. While Democrats are certainly not the favorites for the House, the GOP is more than likely to pick that up, and they aren't the favorites in the United States Senate as of the beginning of this month. There is still a possibility that they hold out in some of these very competitive races, and as this polling data might suggest, despite Biden being down 24 points in one of the crucial swing states for 2022, Democrats are only down by no more than 4 percentage points across the state, which is definitely a huge warning sign for the GOP and their potential inability at winning over voters this midterm season. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.